Mr. Secretary General, Mr. President, world leaders, and distinguished delegates, welcome to New York. It is a profound honor to stand here in my home city as a representative of the American people to address the people of the world. As millions of our citizens continue to suffer the effects of the devastating hurricanes that have struck our country, I want to begin by expressing my appreciation to every leader in this room who has offered assistance and aid. The American people are strong and resilient, and they will emerge from these hardships more determined than ever before. Fortunately, the United States has done very well since Election Day last November 8th. The stock market is at an all-time high, a record. Unemployment is at its lowest level in 16 years. And because of our regulatory and other reforms, we have more people working in the United States today than ever before. Companies are moving back, creating job growth, the like of which our country has not seen in a very long time. And it has just been announced that we will spend almost $700 billion in our military and defense. Our military will soon be the strongest it has ever been, for more than 70 years, in times of war and peace. The leaders of nations, movements, and religions have stood before this assembly. Like them, I intend to address some of every serious threats before us today, but also enormous potential waiting to be unleashed. We live in a time of extraordinary opportunity, breakthroughs in science, technologies, and medicine, and curing illnesses and solving problems that prior generations thought impossible to solve. But each day also brings news of growing dangers and threaten everything we cherish and value. Terrorists and extremists have gathered strength and threats to every region of the planet. Ruled regimes, represented in the body, not only support terror, but threaten other nations and their own people with the most destructive weapons known to humanity. Authority and authoritarian powers seek to collapse the values, the systems, and alliances that prevented conflict and tilted the world toward freedom since World War II. International criminal networks traffic drugs, weapons, people, forced dislocation, and mass migration. Written our borders, and new forms of aggressions explore technology to manage our citizens. To put it simply, we meet at a time of both immense promise and great peril. It is entirely up to us whether to lift the world to new heights or let it fall into a valley of despair. We have in our power, should we so true, to lift millions up from poverty, to help our citizens realize their dreams, and to ensure that generations of children are raised free from violence, hardships, and fear. These institutions were founded in the aftermath of two world wars to help shape the better future. Us were based on the visions that diverse nations could cooperate to protect their sovereignty, preserve their security, and promote their prosperity. It was in the same period exactly 70 years ago that the United States developed the Marshall Plan to help restore Europe. Those three beautiful pillars, they are pillars of peace, sovereignty, security, and prosperity. The Marshall Plan was built on the noble idea that the whole world is safer and nations are strong independent, and free. As President Truman said in his message to Congress at that time, our support to European recovery is in full accord with our support to the United Nations. The success of the United Nations depends upon the independent strength of its members. To overcome the fear of depression and to achieve the promise of the future, we must begin with the wisdom of the past. Our success depends on coalition of strong and independent nations that embrace their sovereignty to promote security, prosperity, and peace and for themselves and for the world. We do not expect diverse countries to share the same culture, tradition, or even systems of government. But we do expect our nations to uphold these two core sovereign duties to respect the interests of their own people and the rights of every other sovereign nation. These beautiful visions of this institution, and this is the foundation for cooperation and success. Strong sovereign nations, a diverse country with different values, different cultures, and different dreams, not just coexist, but work side by side on the basis of the mutual respect. Strong sovereign nations let their people take ownership of the futures and control their own destiny. And strong sovereign nations allow individuals to flourish in the fullness of the life intended by God. In American, we do not seek to impose our ways of life on anyone, but rather to let it shine as an example for everyone to watch. This week gives our country a special reason to take pride in that example. We are celebrating the 230th anniversary of our beloved Constitution, an old Constitution still in use in the world today. This timeless document has been the foundation of peace, prosperity, and freedom for the Americans, and for the countless millions around the globe who own countries have found inspiration in its respect for human nature, human dignity, and the rule of law. The rated in the United States Constitution is first three beautiful words. They are, "We the people, generation of Americans, have sacrificed to maintain the promise of those words." The promise of our country and of our great history. In American, people govern, the people rule, and the people are sovereign. I was elected not to take power, but to give power to the American people where it belongs. In foreign affairs, we are renewing this founding principle of sovereignty, our government's fair duty to its people, to our citizens, assert their needs to ensure the safety and preserve their rights and to defend their values. As President of the United States, I will always put American first. Just like you, as leaders of your country, we always and should always put your countries first. As responsible leaders have an obligation to share their own citizens, and the nation states remain the best vehicle for elevating the human condition. But making the better life of our people also requires us to work together in close harmony and unity to create a more safe and peaceful future for all people. The United States will forever be a great friend to the world and especially to its allies. But we can no longer be taken advantage of or enter into a one-sided deal where the United States gets nothing in return. As long as I hold this office, I will depend Americans' interests above all else, but in fulfilling our obligations to our nations. We also realize that it is everyone's interest to seek the futures where all nations can be sovereign, prosperous, and secure. Americans stand more than speak for the values expressed in the United Nations Charter. Our citizens have paid the ultimate price to defend our freedom and freedom of many nations represented in this great home. Americans' devotion is measured in the battlefields where our young men and women have fought and sacrificed alongside our allies. From the beaches of Europe to the deserts of the Middle East to the jungles of Asia, it is an internal credit to American character that even after we in our life emerge victorious from the bloodiest war in history, we did not seek territorial expansion or attempt to oppose and impose our way of life on others. Instead, we have built institutions such as this one to defend the sovereignty, security, and prosperity for all, for the diverse nations of the world. This is our hope. We want harmony and friendship, not conflict and strife. We are guided by outcomes, not ideologies. We have a policy principle realism rooted in shared goal, interests, and values. Thus, realism forces us to confront the question facing every leader and nations in this room. It is the questions we cannot escape or avoid. We will slide down the fast of complacency, numb to the challenges, threats, and even worse that we face. Or we do have enough strength and pride to confront the dangers today, so that our citizens can enjoy peace and prosperity tomorrow. If we desire to lift up our citizens, if we aspire to approval of history, then we must fulfill our sovereign duties to the people we faithfully represent. We must protect our nation, their interests, and their futures. We must reject threats to sovereigns from the Ukraine to the South China Sea. We must uphold respect for law, respect for borders, and respect for culture, and the people engagement these allow. And just as the founders of this body intended, we must work together and confront together those who threaten Earth with chaos, turmoil, and terror. There are scores of our planet today, in small groups and rule regimes that violate every principle that the United Nations is based. They respect neither their own citizens nor the sovereign rights of their countries. If the righteous many do not confront the weaker few, then evil will triumph. When nations, people, and nations become bystanders to history, the forces of destruction only gather power and strength. No one has shown more contempt for other nations and for the well-being of their own people than the depraved regimes in North Korea. It is responsible for the starvation and deaths of millions of North Koreans and for the imprisonment, torture, killing, and oppression of countless more. We were on witness the regime's deadly abuse when innocent American college student Otto Warmbier was returned to America, only to die a few days later. We saw us in the assassination of the dictator borders using bad nor agents in the international airports. We know it's kidnapped a sweet 30-year-old Japanese girl from a beach in her own country, to enslave her as a language tutor for North Korea's spies. It is not threatening enough. Now North Korea's reckless pursuit of nuclear weapons threatens the entire world with unthinkable loss of human life. It is an outrage that some nations would not only trade with such a regime, but would arm, supply, and financial support a country that imperils the world with nuclear conflict. No nations on earth have interest in seeing the bank of criminal arm itself with nuclear weapons and missiles. The United States has great strength and patience, but if it's forced to defend itself or its allies, we will no choice but totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States are ready, willing and able, but hopefully they will not be necessary. That's what the United Nations is all about. That's what the United Nations is for. Let's see how they do. It's time for North Korea to realize that the denuclearization is its only acceptable future. The United States Security Council recently had two unanimous 50-0 votes adopting hard-hitting resolution against North Korea, and I want to thank China and Russia for joining the vote to impose sanctions along with all the other members of the Security Council. Thank you all for our only vote.